Hi everyone, welcome back to my lesson. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. Hope you had a lovely week as well. Just to introduce myself, my name is Shazi. I hope you all are really well. In today's lesson, we'll be looking at vocabulary for IELTS, and also we'll look at some key important information for grammar as well. Just to let you know that we are going to be going for a break, so we'll be back in January. This will actually be my last lesson, so you won't see me next Saturday live, but those of you who have your Zoom lessons with me will continue the Zoom lessons, so it won't affect them. It'll only affect the live lesson for the time being. So let's get straight into the lesson. I'm just going to share my screen with you first. I won't be a second. So today's lesson, we will, in today's lesson, the aim of the lesson is that we'll focus on some word lists and some exercises and some pronunciation as well. So let's look at some topics firstly for improving your English vocabulary in general. So we're just looking in general to help improve. So in today's lesson, we'll just focus on advertising because it's quite a long list. So there is a lot of things on the list like art, paintings, body language, crime and punishment, and the list does go on. So it's quite a long list to go through in one lesson, and I don't want you to go away from the lesson and feel more confused than you were to start off with. So what we'll do is we'll try to focus on one subject in this lesson. So if we just focus on the first one, as the first thing on the list was advertising, as you can see, just advertising. So what we'll do is we'll focus on advertising. So advertising is a common topic in both IELTS speaking and writing task 2. So it is actually a common topic that will help you with both of the IELTS speaking and the writing your task 2. So first of all, what will really help you is if you learn all the basic vocabulary. And so what I've picked is advertising. So these are my picks. So what I've done is I've looked at the main type of advertising. So the main types are TV commercials. So we see that advertisers being displayed on TV when you're watching any programs on TV, and then it cuts it and puts the commercial in. So that is an advertise. And then we also see advertisements in newspapers. So when you're reading the newspaper, you come across an advertisement in there. Also, when you're reading a magazine, you come across some advertisements in there as well. And billboards as well, don't forget, on boards, notice boards, etc. There's advertisement on them as well. And then there's other types of advertisement as well. There's internet pop-ups. So you've probably aware of them when you're watching something and it pops up. You get a notification and some news comes up, or some advertisement comes up advertising a sale on a certain item, or advertising anything that you've bought, and it suddenly become 20% off that, and you see that advertisement pop up. Also direct mail, because you receive mail through the post, which is to do with advertisements. Sometimes you get leaflets, sometimes you just get direct mail that's actually addressed to yourself. And then email advertising as well. So you're probably really familiar with email ads that come through. Radio advertising, as you're listening to the radio, quite a few advertisements quite regularly come up on some radio stations. Flyers, which we just discussed, that would be like leaflets that come through your door or that are handed out to you. So I don't know whether you've ever picked up on when you're in a city centre and you've you're catching your tram and they stop you to give you some leaflets. So that's another way of advertising. And text messages. So you're probably familiar with text messages when you receive a text message and it's actually an advertisement message. So let's look at some of the words that we can use with advertising. So obviously ad for short, we've always heard that in conversation. So that's a noun, ad for advertisement. Advert is a noun, and then advertise is a verb. Advertising is a verb, and then you're adding the ing on. Advertisement is a noun. Also, what I'm going to do is, like, in today's lesson, I'm going to look at some quite difficult words that would help. Like, if you memorize, do you remember in my previous lesson when I discussed that sometimes just memorizing a really difficult word and then adding it into a simple sentence actually changes the whole outlook of your sentence, because that's what they're looking at. The examiner is looking for that you've got good vocabulary and that you've got a good sense of grammar. So just taking a simple sentence and adding quite a difficult word into that simple sentence just shows that you're really confident using words. I'm just going to have a look as well quickly that if anyone's got any questions. So I'm just going to send a comment as well just to welcome you all to my lesson. Let's get back to this. So one of the words that I was looking into was plethora. So to break it down, it's plethora. So Plethora, plethora. And the meaning to this word is plenty or excessive, like there's too much of something. So think about, if you memorize a word like this, you can put in, I visited a restaurant and they had a plethora of food items. So it's obviously just adding that simple word and you can notice the difference of using a simple sentence and just adding one complicated word in there, and it changes the whole outlook. Mesmerize is another word that I've been looking into. So mesmerize is a word that you can use in a sentence. So if you want to say the painting was so beautiful, you can say the painting was so beautiful, I was mesmerized. So mesmerized is a word that I use quite frequently and quite commonly because it's a word that has amount of class about it, amount of style about it. So that's what they're looking at, that you're really confident with these words. So you can just have a simple sentence and add one word that's quite a complicated word that would show that you have extended knowledge on grammar. To break the word down to help you to remember it, because remember, it's critical that you know how to spell your word. So you don't want to have this like really good and really it's a word that's sort of an uncommon word that you wouldn't use day to day, but it's a word obviously you're not spelling it day to day, so it's quite hard to remember the word. So what my tip would be that break the word down, so as I have done with mesmerize. So remember it as mes, mes, and then me, and then rise. So rise is a very easy word to spell on its own, and then mesmerize together might sound quite difficult to you, but break it down when you're remembering your words, break them down. So let's look at some more words. So these are the words that I want you to focus on. So stringent means strict. So stringent, spelled stringent, stringent, and the meaning to it is strict. So their method was stringent, meaning their method was really strict, so they were strict about things. Another word, exuberant, means cheerful. So you could add in exuberant when you want to say someone was really cheerful. Her actions made me feel exuberant, so you felt cheerful through somebody's actions. Again, a word very stylish and very just to say the word, it's not something that you'd probably use day to day. You'd probably be using cheerful day to day, but just using a word like exuberant shows the examiner that you're really confident and that you've got really excellent grammar there. Equanimity is another word that I've got for you. Equanimity means calmness, so calmness is the simple word for it. She told the children with great equanimity, so that means she told the children with great calmness. So you can see by just adding these words in, you've got a really simple sentence. She told the children with great, so anybody can put that sentence together. And then I've just added equanimity in there, and you can see the difference, how it would sound if I used calmness. So if I use the word calmness, she told the children with great calmness, is really simple. But I've changed that word for equanimity, which makes it just sound so much more, the grammar there, so much more sophisticated. So for the rest of the lesson, I've actually designed another slide for you, which I want you to, as part of this lesson, to focus on the meanings of some words and some signs that we use. So I'm going to actually just open that slide for you. So basically, firstly, we look at abstract noun. So what is an abstract noun? It's a noun that names something that we cannot physically experience. So for example, it's freedom, conversation. It's something that we physically don't experience. That's what an abstract noun is. Active voice. So what do you think the active voice is? In the active voice, the subject performs the action. So for example, I hit the ball. Hit is the active voice. Yep, so hit is the active voice here. Adverb. So what is an adverb? So we're just going back to basics and trying to think the common grammar, which will help us a lot in our Ielts. So adverb is a word that adds the meaning to a verb or an adjective or comments on a clause. For example, he walked slowly, sadly, he was too late. So slowly and sadly here are the adverbs. So we know he walked, and then we know slowly and sadly, so they are the adverbs. Adverbial. So the term adverbial is a word or phrase that gives us extra information about a verb or an event. Antonym is a word that means the opposite of another word. So any word that you have and you want to put the opposite to that word. So the opposite usually is the negative term of a word. So the correct term for that is antonym. So if you have a word and you just want to make it the opposite to it, so the negative for that word, it means antonym. Apostrophe is a pronunciation mark that's used in contraction, or it shows possession. Let's move on to auxiliary verb. Is a helper verb such as am, are, or is. or you've got have or has. In some verb forms, this comes before the main verb. So before your main verb, you'll have a word like am or as or are or is. And here that's an auxiliary verb. Brackets. So the pair of pronunciation marks that are brackets that look like this, they're used to show parentheses. Colon. So what do you think a colon is? So it's not, we're not talking about the scientific term here of the large intestine. It's a punctuation mark used to introduce a list or a second main clause that explains the first or expands on the first. So them two dots that you see commonly used, and the equally sized dots, and this the dots are vertical, so they're up and down on the same line, and they are called colon in grammar. A comma is a punctuation mark used to separate sentences. So the comma that's below, so it comes below your word or your letter. It comes below, so it's a comma and it's a punctuation mark. So to use it correctly, make sure you use it when you're separating two sentences. A conditional sentence is a sentence when one event depends on another. So often uses if. So obviously if you are putting a conditional sentence together, it usually relies on another event, and the word if is common in a conditional sentence. So for example, let's think of an example. You will get wet if it rains. This is a conditional sentence because you will get wet if it rains. So it relies on the rain. You'll get wet if it rains. Conjunction. So what do you think a conjunction is? A word that joins together two clauses to make one longer sentence. So there's different types of conjunctions. There's the coordinating conjunctions, which are like words like and, but, or. And what they do is they link together two words or even two phrases or even two clauses. Both of the sentences or the clauses or the phrases or the words are equally as important to each other. So when they're connected together, the both sentences are important sentences. And we'd connect them with the conjunctions and, but, or. There's also subordinating conjunctions like because, when, while. These introduce a more or less important clause. So remember, subordinating conjunctions introduce a less important clause, and coordinating conjunctions, both of the sentences are equally as important. Contractions. What are contractions? They are shortened form of words. So when we say do not and we can say don't, these are contractions. So they're any words that you can shorten, like has not, hasn't. Yep, so that's a contraction. Or she is and she isn't. Dash. So a dash is a punctuation mark used to show a parenthesis or to separate main clauses. So a dash looks like this, and it is a punctuation mark and it's used to show a parenthesis or to separate main clauses. Moving on to a determiner. So a determiner is a word that specifies a noun or a noun phrase. So an example, a cat, this dog. So we're talking in particular that this dog. So this here is the determiner. So we know which dog we're talking about. It's an individual and we're referring to that dog. Here this is the determiner. So any word that refers to a particular thing is a determiner, or a specific thing is a determiner, so it usually refers to a specific noun or a noun phrase. Ellipsis is missing out predictable words to avoid the repetition. Also sometimes you see it's like an added punctuation mark, like them little dots that you see, like to be continued, and then you see dot dot. So usually it's to not repeat the same phrases or the same words. They don't want to repeat themselves, so it's dot dot dot. And also I want you to think about homonyms. What's a homonym? It's a word that has the same spelling as another word, but obviously means the two words that mean totally different to each other, but they're spelled exactly the same. So I've given you an example, given tree bark, so we know that there's tree bark and dog's bark. They both are spelled exactly the same, but they have different meanings, and the context of them is different in the sentences. So that's where I want you to be wary of words that are spelled the same, but they have different meanings. Moving on to hyphen. So there's hyphen, which is a punctuation mark, and it's used to join words together, or you can join prefixes together. So for example, you've got sugar-free, which you can join together using a hyphen. Re-enter, you've got a hyphen there. Also you have a main clause. A main clause is a clause that makes sense on its own, so even when you just put that one phrase on its own, it makes sense. So the girl shouted, for example. The example is the girl shouted. We put the boy shouted. You could say the mother shouted. Again, that's a main clause and it makes sense on its own without relying on anything else. Sorry, I will be replying to your messages. I just wanted to get through try to get through everything, and then I'll reply to your messages at the end of the lesson. So a modal verb is a verb used to show different levels of possibility. So think about a modal verb, different levels of possibility. So it could be the word could, might, will. These are words that show different levels of possibility. So it could happen, it might happen, it will happen. Can you see the difference? So this is a modal verb because it shows us what level of possibility that something could happen. A multi-clause sentence is a sentence that contains more than one clause. Yep, so it's a multi-clause sentence because it's got more than one. Noun phrase. A noun phrase and the words that go with it. Yep, noun phrase means a noun and the words that go with it. For example, the fast police car. Object. Object is the person or thing in a sentence that receives the action. For example, I hit the ball. Here, the ball is the object. Yep. So think about the object as well in your sentence. The object is just the person or the thing that receives the action. Yep. So the ball in that, if you just have a good look at that phrase, I hit the ball is the object. Parenthesis is a non-essential detail added into a sentence by using commas, brackets, dashes. So it's the non-essential detail. So it's not something that is really essential to that clause. It's the non-essential details, so it's not something you really need to focus on. It's something that's not as important as the main clause of the sentence. It's not essential. The detail is not essential, and that's what parenthesis means. Passive voice is the what the subject receives the action. Yeah. So the ball was hit is the passive voice. Let's look at perfect form. So a perfect form is a verb or form used to refer to events that happened in the past but are still important now. So the tent has collapsed. Yeah. So it's already collapsed. We know it's collapsed, but has is a perfect form. So it's still important in the current situation, although it happened in the past. Yep. That is perfect form. Possessive noun is a word used in place of a noun to show possession. So for example, mine or yours. These are possessive pronouns. So if you're referring to something belongs to you, it's mine. Yep. Yours. These are possessive pronouns. Let's move on to preposition. So preposition is a word that shows how things relate to each other in terms of time, the place, or the cause. So for example, the time that the thing happened in is the preposition. So after, on, so it happened on Saturday. It happened after the party. Due to. So preposition is the term that tells us the time or the place or the cause, and it shows us the time or the place or the cause, how things relate to each other. Yep. Progressive form is the ing verb. So we can add ing onto words to make them into continuous action. So it's still happening. They were singing. So although they were singing in the past, but we saying they were continuously singing, but the action happened in the past here. They were singing. So it's the ing verb it's the ing that we can add to the verb to describe the continuous action. Because if we put they were sing, that wouldn't make sense. So we add the ing on because they were, although they sung in the past, so they've already done this action, but it's continuous at some point in the past. Pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. So for example, he. A relative clause is a type of subordinate clause that starts with a relative pronoun. That a relative pronoun is a pronoun used in relative clauses to refer back to the noun. So, for example, who or that. Let's look at semicolon, a punctuation mark used to separate longer items in a list or two main clauses in a sentence. And the subject. So the subject is the person or a thing in the sentence that is the doer of the action. So where we were looking at hit the ball, she hit the ball, he hit the ball, they hit the ball. Here she is the subject. Yeah, she is the subject. We could change that to he. So whoever the person or the thing is that's doing the action is the subject. A subjunctive form is a verb form that is used in formal speech and writing. So it refers to wishes or imaginary situations, suggestions, and demands. So I wish I were taller. So were here is the subjunctive form. So it usually refers to anything that you wish for. You imagining the situation, or a suggestion, or it could be a demand as well. So I wish I were taller. So the were here is the subjunctive form. A subordinate clause is a clause added to a main clause which does not make sense on its own. So it's the main clause, and then when you add something to it, but if you took the main clause away, that wouldn't make the subordinate clause on its own wouldn't make any sense on its own. It relies on the main clause. So if you take the main clause away, the subordinate clause won't make any sense to you. So it relies on it, so it'll be the second part. So if you think about you writing about a topic and you write the first part and you're on to the second part, that second part on its own won't make any sense. It relies on the first part. A synonym is a word that has the same meaning to another word. So sometimes we refer to it as a better word. So if we have words like a word like, say, we have bathroom. So we can actually, a good synonym for bathroom, we can change to restroom or to washroom. So synonyms are just words that can replace another word. And usually we like to have better words. And we look at the tenses as well. So a tense, what does a tense mean? The tense of a verb tells you when the action happened, whether it happened in the past or the present. So that's the tense, or whether it's or whether you're planning it in the future. For example, we've got play and played. So play is present, played is past. So he plays is present, he played is past, so he's already done the action, it's happened in the past. So when you are using your tense in the context of a sentence, you have to make sure that the flow of that sentence is correct, because you don't want to mix your tenses and put something that's happened in the past and then you put words like is, because is something that we use in the present tense, and was is a word that we use something that happened in the past. So what you don't want to do is get these two mixed up. You want to make sure that these two remain in the right context. Right. So what I'm going to do is just answer to your questions as well, by going back in the slides and just going over the topic a bit more. I know it's difficult in the live lessons to really get a grasp of things, but if you would like me to do personal lessons, please contact the company that I work for, which is Mpub Ielts. If you drop them a message and request to have personal lessons, it's something that they can arrange for you. So for homonyms, if it's the first, for anyone that's heard it the first time, it's two words that are actually spelt exactly the same, but they have different meanings. So, for example, if you want to say that something happened in your back garden, you'll use the word BACK, back. It happened in the back garden or the backyard. But also your back, so the part of your body, your back, that's from your shoulders at the back or behind you on your back, is also spelled the same, BACK, back. So you could say that your back has been injured. Again, it would be spelt the same, so it's easy to get confused because they're spelt the same. So not until you hear the full sentence and you read the full sentence, you don't know which context that word is being used in. So whereas I've used example the tree bark and the dog's bark, which is spelt exactly the same, it's easy to get confused unless you hear the full sentence and you know which context it's being used in. If you don't hear the full sentence, you can actually get confused because it's got two different meanings. So just be careful with these words. And there's many other homonyms. What I suggest that you actually keep following our lessons, and we'll go through it in more detail. Because we're on a break now till January, there won't be any more lessons till January. If you would like lessons before that, please do request them, because we can give you personalized lessons where we can address anything that you have one-to-one, in a one-to-one lesson even. So please do contact the company personal, give them a direct message and let them know that you would actually like a personal lesson, and it's something that they can arrange for you. And then we can expand more in the personal lessons on any questions that you have, and we can elaborate more in them lessons. Because we're only very limited on time for the live lessons. Therefore, I do really recommend to you that if you could give a direct message, I'd be more than happy to give you personal one-to-one lessons and elaborate more and explain things in a lot of detail. So what I will be doing is, because it's coming to the end of the lesson now, I'll actually be replying to all the questions that you had. After this lesson, I'll go back and reply to all of your questions. Hope you have a nice holiday, and if I don't see you before January, have a nice new year. Thank you. Take care. Bye.